Kia ora tātou, thank you for joining us for our last hour on RNZ Sunday morning. The annual Auckland Writers' Festival is upon us, Waituhi o Tamaki, one of the best attended festivals in the world. And on festival director Anne O'Brien's watch, numbers increased in a decade from 25,000 each year to more than 80,000. The Aotea Centre each year is heaving, to use an adjective not on many of the books being discussed. Anne's our guest on what I'm listening to this morning, but this is her last festival. Why is she going? Kia ora, Anne.
Kia ora, Jim.
Why are you going?
Well, some days I wonder why I am myself. I'm going because it's 11 years and I just need a little bit more space in my day. It's an all-consuming role, and I think it's just time for me to push through the fear of what happens next and find out. I also think it's good for the organisation after 11 years to position itself to what happens for the next decade. And that needs, fresh eyes and an outsider's perspective. So, yeah, as I say, I'm an R about whether it's been a great decision, but it's the decision that's made.
With your festival, because it's so successful, I imagine many writers are begging to be included, but with some, you have to do the begging yourself. You have to turn on the charm.
Yes, you have to be very tenacious, which is one of my store characteristics, particularly if you're in somewhere like New Zealand, because we're a long way from anywhere. If we're talking about the international marketplace, it's a long trip. There's not a huge amount of remuneration. There's a beautiful country. So you do, but what I have found is that writers generally are really interested in New Zealand. They like the openness that we bring and the hospitality that we bring. And so I'm just myself generally. I think they will tell you whether they want to come or not. Plenty of people say no. For everyone, yes. I always say there's about 30 to 40 no's.
Oh, really?
But the people who do come are just so fantastic. And so Kate Goldie taught me this actually very early on. She said, I was crestfallen. Someone had declined. I thought, I will never have a festival without this person. It will be a disaster. And she said, and the people who come, they will be the people and they will make the festival what it is, and you will entirely forget all the people that you invited before. And that is true, actually.
That's a shrewd comment, actually.
Yeah, I try to use it as a touchstone, because what I always do when someone says no is try to make them change their mind. And my partner says to me, that's a no, Anne. Don't go back on that. You just have to let it sit. I've learnt a little bit, I think, over the last 10 years to let it sit now. But it's hard because you just think, I can make this a really beautiful experience for you. Just come on this journey with me.
There's a lot of active seeking for the people who assume that it's a giant circuit and one day they're doing Kuala Lumpur and then Perth and then Auckland. It just doesn't quite happen like that.
No, it doesn't happen like that. And part of the reason is because there are giant circuits. So writers write a book and then they publish it, and all of a sudden, particularly the higher up the rankings you go, your publisher has you going to 48 states in America over the space of about 3.5 weeks, and you're exhausted. So people, when you say get on a plane for 24 hours, in fact, I talked to an English writer once, and he said to me, I met him at the festival and he was coming, and he said to me, so I've never been on a plane further than Turkey. What's it going to be like? And I thought, I don't even want to answer that question. So there are circuits, and certainly those circuits can help you if your timing's right and it works with them. But I'm also interested in writers who aren't necessarily just doing the PR run. I want to talk about body of work, and I want to get people that often aren't on that circuit. Sometimes I've gone to festivals and just come across someone and thought, you're quite incredible, your work's great, and actually I know that an audience is going to love you. And that works, yep.
So you don't pay them much, so they want to sell books, and do they through festivals? I suppose they must.
Well, they do sell books. I don't think any author sells, huge number of books anywhere, although famously Neil Gaiman did sign for 6.5 hours last year at the festival, which is a record. He was still there after 6 o'clock. We had to put the stanchions up and say, I'm sorry, no one else can now join this queue. He was amazing. So you do sell books. They're probably small and, they're not in the multiple thousands. But for writers, that's obviously part of the process, because if they hear you, they might buy your book now, they'll seek your work out later, they'll find other pieces of your work. And because it's such a solitary pursuit, writers will genuinely, I believe, say that actually a festival is a chance for me to leave my room and be with the people who do this with me, alongside me. And that for writers, is actually one of the most important experiences of a festival.
Speaking of leaving their room, you move into a hotel with the writers for the duration of their stay here?
I do. That sort of started, it's a little bit redundant at the moment, because I like to greet every writer as long as the schedule allows on arrival. I figure if you got on a plane and came all this way, the least I can do is say hello to you. And as you will know, Jim, many flights arrive at about 5:30 in the morning. So what happens, literally, is my driver will be at the airport, meet this writer, and then they will ring me in the hotel room and say, we are now leaving the airport. And I will throw my clothes on and get downstairs and be there so that when that car arrives, I can welcome them. And then we have a pack and we go through their schedule. So that's how that started. But also it's a really big, intensive week. So it's you're close to the venue, you're close to the office, and you can just kind of get straight into your day.
Do many of them have rock star demands, like the famous bands do?
Well, not many, but occasionally you do come across such stories. I'm not a great one for that. I think we actually do have a beautiful offering in terms of the hotel, and we have a couple of hostings and parties. Very occasionally, it's not usually the writers, to be honest. It's usually the agents and the managers.
Ah, really?
So it's the gatekeeper level where everything needs to be just so. And I would say 99 times out of 100, when that person, that human being, suddenly steps foot on the soil, you discover they don't have those pretensions or requirements. But we have been known to run around from time to time and find edamame beans, on Queen Street of a particular type, just to keep things ticking over.
I suppose what goes on in the room stays in the room anyway. You wouldn't like to tell tales until your memoir.
That's right. I'm keeping it all for secret. No, well, I do try to be discreet, because actually you don't want to ruin someone's love for a writer by telling them what they're really like. Although, again, most of the writers we've had, we've loved. Occasionally you think, but I'm never going to tell that story because you may change your mind about their work, and that is not what we want to do.
When the festival's on, do you actually get time during proceedings to sit and watch?
No. I sit in my room doing various things, welcoming people, walking the halls, trying to deal with crises. I do have it on a tannoy, so in my office I can hear. I will watch the start of things sometimes just to see how the audience is and how it goes. And I have to say, when Haruki Murakami came, actually take about half an hour and sit side of stage with his wife and watch, because that was kind of a moment to have him here. But generally, and even if I could, I probably wouldn't. You know me, Jim, I'm a bit antsy for that sort of sitting still.
Speaking of him, who have been your great gets, do you think, across the years, the most memorable?
Well, I mean, I think Murakami was pretty huge. He doesn't really do much at all in the public space. And I'd been inviting him for about 14 years in various guises, including when I worked at Radio New Zealand as a producer. And then every year I'd think, well, no, they just say, no, it's never going to happen. But, I'll just send another letter. And then one day I sent a letter, and I got a letter back saying, yes, he's going to come. And the agent said, I'm going to come with him. And I'm like, right. So I looked up the agent, who was married to Amanda Urban, who's married to Ken Auletta, famous New Yorker journalist. I'm like, oh, you're married to Ken. Is Ken coming? And she said, yes, he is. I said, great, let's put Ken in the festival. So that was pretty special. But also, there have been people like, there's a woman called Emma Skye, who I just came across in a pub in New York doing a talking event, and her story was extraordinary. She'd worked in Afghanistan with American generals, having come from the Peace Corps effectively. That was amazing. But also, Eleanor Catton trying to lead a workshop for 2,000 students with a whiteboard at the front and yelling out to the room, give me the name of something. There's just been some really special moments.
Any disasters?
Yes. Not too many. I mean, if I'm going to speak frankly, the worst disaster when I think about the last 11 years was Ai Weiwei last year. We just had terrible technical difficulties. Despite a fantastic team. He was in Portugal, he had a window open, there was a parrot squeaking in the background. He mumbled a bit. And then there are a lot of people who legitimately think that possibly someone scrambled the airwaves for that. Anyway, a lot of people couldn't hear. Some people could, a lot of people couldn't, and there was a lot of unhappiness. And to have sort of put someone into the program that I'd wanted to put in for years and for it to go so badly wrong was pretty disheartening. But overall, when you think of the hundreds of events every year over 11 years, can't really complain.
Is it mainly fun, or is it mainly nerve-wracking with all the organisation required?
It's nerve-wracking right up. Well, it's good in the beginning because you're out there just looking for writers and building a program and being creative. And then all of a sudden, for about 3 months, you're writing program copy in the middle of summer and pulling 250 schedules 3 times and changing them. Those are that. And then you get into this sort of moment of the last month or so where you're just trying to anticipate every problem and make sure you minimise it. And then you get to this moment where you think, okay, no point in anticipating anymore. What's going to happen is going to happen. I'm going to wait, and then we'll resolve as it goes along. And then it moves into fun. And by the time you get into the rhythm of the week itself, you feel great. You know, it's just there's people, they're happy, authors are happy, books are being read and bought and talked about, and yeah, it's a really invigorating thing.
Did you ever think of inviting the other Anne O'Brien, writer of historical romances like The Disgraced Marchioness, Rake Without Redemption, and The King's Concubine?
Well, I know Anne O'Brien quite well because I'm on a Google alert. So I always think Anne O'Brien is like John Smith. It's the Irish version of John Smith. So on my Google alerts, every morning I get in and there are all sorts of stories about Anne O'Briens around the world, dead, alive, buried, writing. So yes, I don't think she's been on my top of my wish list. Limited budget, you have to make your choices.
I understand.
But there's nothing wrong with actually a broad range of writers and gathering stories across genres to bring your audience, which in the end is what matters for a festival.
I saw you asked once in a New Zealand Herald piece what you were reading. How much do you read?
Well, I read a lot, but possibly not cover to cover. Would be the truth
you're
you're programming. I'm not in my post-festival life. I won't be a skimmer, and I wasn't before. But yeah, you've got such a volume of work, and you're trying to assess what's going to work in a program and what's going to work for an audience, and so you dip in and out of things a lot to get a sense of the work and the quality, and then you put aside. Over Christmas, New Year, I read a lot more New Zealand work than I do international work because you have to make choices, and so you have to have a really good understanding of what that is. So there's a period, and every so often I just think, I'm just going to actually read something for myself. At the moment, I'm not really reading that much because we're running into festival week, but there's a book called 3 Martinis Afternoons, which is about Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton, and they used to go and drink martinis in the afternoons in New York while they were being poets together. And so that's my kind of little pleasure moment that I'm having at the moment.
The journalist Michelle Hewitson once wrote of you, if Anne were a book, she would be a book which had done away with commas and full stops and semicolons and replaced them with exclamation marks, which I thought was quite good. Do you need to be loud to run a festival like this? What are your sterling qualities?
I don't always know that I'm as loud as I am, actually. Sometimes, I'm loud, but I don't necessarily mean to be. I think I'm energetic and passionate. And I have a kind of wide range of interests and a really good sort of sense of audience. So those are my sort of qualities, I think. There are different types of festival directors, but I think you do have to have some level of energy to lead a team, to inspire an audience to come, and to grow that group of writers who will gather to deliver the goods. So there is something to be said for a little bit of loudness now and again, but I do try to sometimes anchor myself more in a bit of quiet just to balance the books.
Your dad, Kevin, was the very long time Chancellor of Victoria University, but you've had lots of different jobs. You've worked in childcare, investment banking, journalism and grief counselling. You've taught English to refugees. You've been a radio producer, as you said. You studied Buddhism with a Lama, and you once lived in India in a small hut on a mountainside. Which of those taught you the most?
In some ways, probably this job, because of its longevity, has taught me the most about myself. I don't normally stay in a job for 11 years. And so that has really challenged me to grapple with the things that I'm not so good at and to try and frame myself in a way that can get the best out of myself over a long period of time. But I think one of the beauties of being a festival director, as it is a radio producer, in fact, across most of the things I've done, is that broad range of kind of interest and experiences. You bring it all to the table. And that is the beauty. I think that's what has made me a good festival director, is that I have this wide range of things that I'm interested in and can do. And actually, when you're growing a festival program, you're saying, let's talk about science, let's talk about music, let's play some, songs, let's explore poetry, let's talk about what's happening out there in the streets in terms of protest. And so I think every single one of those experiences has kind of made me able to do this job.
Yeah, good answer. That makes sense. In the Times Literary Supplement, the writer Alexander Lahmann has lambasted festivals in the UK. Sheer hell in a tent, is the title of his piece. And among his criticisms are that celebrity authors now dominate the children's book market and no one else gets a look in, that really good writers are often shy and not suited to the stage, that the chances of getting a book published if you're not well connected or a member of an underrepresented group that has become a cause célèbre are as low as they have ever been. 8 out of 10 authors lose money on their books. So quite a list. Any comment?
Wow. Have we got another 15 minutes to talk about that? I mean, like many things, there's an element of truth in all of those statements, but they are not the whole of the parts. So, I mean, he comes from the UK. Someone once told me you could drive from Cornwall right up to the top and go to a literary festival every day. That is not the same in New Zealand. Getting Ian McEwan up the road is a lot easier than getting him across the waters. It is true that authors now have to market themselves, and actually festivals do that. I do believe that some writers aren't designed for the stage. I try not to put those writers on the stage because I think in the end what we want people to do is find their work. And if you're not the best marketer for your work, let's let the book do that business. But actually we have emerging writers across the board. We're really committed to New Zealand writers, and actually 80% of the writers in our program are New Zealand. So whatever they're doing in the UK, we're doing something that hopefully Alexander would find slightly more palatable.
And what will you do now? Because life will seem quiet, won't it?
It will seem quiet, and I'm not that great with change, so I think this is a bit of a nerve-wracking phase. For a little while, I think I'll just, as I say, take a bit of time. I'm the chair of a charity, Everybody Eats, so I'll maybe go and do some volunteer shifts in the kitchen. I'll read some books from cover to cover. I'll do a little bit more exercise in the daylight rather than in the dark. And then I hope that, I'm not retiring here. I hope that projects, great new opportunities will come, that I can use these skills, but do something new, work out what the next 10 years look like for me.
Anne O'Brien's been with us, who's run the Auckland Writers and Readers Festival for a decade now, 11 years, I think. What song are you leaving us with today?
I'm leaving you with a little bit of Leonard Cohen, which is not a secret. I'm a big Leonard Cohen fan. We once did a session about Leonard, and Selena Tusitala-Marsh led 400 people singing Hallelujah off lyrics on their phones, waving their arms around.
That'll be cool.
But I also went to see Leonard Cohen documentary a couple of weeks ago, fantastic documentary, and I came out thinking what a beautiful facility with language he has. And my sister then wrote me a thing saying he's such an elegant thinker. And actually he is, in the end, a poet, that kind of that corralling of the language to really sort of say something important. So he's someone I love. I actually own a book that Leonard Cohen sent me.
Really?
I spent about 15 years trying to get Leonard to New Zealand, one of the people who got away. Someone gave me his address. I sent him a Buddhist prayer scarf that I'd brought home from India and a piece of greenstone that my sister donated.
Wow.
And he came back declining, but he sent me a book that says, which he put inside, Dear Anne, thank you for the precious gifts, which is a nice obscure thing from
Yes,
Leonard.
it is.
So I think he epitomises the beauty of language, the kind of the essence of experience. And in the last couple of weeks, I've been pulling 200 schedules at home and listening to Leonard. So it's travelling light. It's about sort of moving on, doing the next thing, seeing where the world takes you.
Lovely to talk to you. All the best with the next thing and for this coming week.
Thank you, Jim.